I have read a book. Yes, please don't freak out. I was scared too. Pages, words, kind of scary. I finally got my hands on Disrupting the Game by Reggie Fils-Aime, a business memoir by the former Nintendo of America president and COO. Recently, these videos and these interviews with Reggie have made the rounds again, where he talks about the story of how he made Nintendo pack Wii Sports in with the console, probably one of the best business decisions the company has ever made, as a little punch against the company that now that they're making you pay 10 euros for that Switch True Tech demo. And it reminded me that this book exists. And I got my hands on it and read it in under a week. I mean, it's only 200 pages long. It's a quick read. There are not a lot of pages, not a lot of words per page. But I could not put this book down. But before we get into what the book has inside, I have to tell you, if you're into good smelling books, this is one to get. This coating on Reggie's face makes it smell like a freshly opened pack of trading cards. And while reading, I constantly had to sniff it, even on the bus. I couldn't stop. So if you're into good smelling books, get this one. What is the book about? So it's a business memoir, so kind of a mix of an autobiography and business lessons that he picked up on along the way. It starts off with his life in the Bronx, how he grew up with parents. He talked about being black in business. And then I looked at the cover and thought, holy hell, Reggie's black. I never realized Reggie's black. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because he's not the darkest black guy out there. But I never realized that Reggie's black. So reading this book blew my mind in that regard. And maybe I blew your mind right now by telling you, yes, Reggie is black. I don't know. That was a shocker to me. He talks about his career and how he went to college, how he put that plan together. And, managing his resources, always a big thing in business. His time, his money, his ability to pay for it, how to pay for it, which college he chose based on that criteria. And then his story through Procter & Gamble, and I think Pizza Hut was the company he worked for. He worked for a television channel. He worked for many different companies before he finally landed his job as a marketing manager for Nintendo of America, and finally then the president of the American arm of our favorite gaming company. His main focus in the book is little business lessons. When you go through here, you can see these gray boxes. So he tells stories and then he summarizes his message in these so what boxes. So even if you come back to this book in the future and you don't want to reread all of it, you can flip through, read these little passages and get the gist of the messages and the lessons he wants to teach you. There's a lot of focus on strategy and planning and having a vision and staying true to your opinions and beliefs. And that really had an impact on me. I'll talk about how this book motivated me to work on my own business again, how to pick that one back up. But he talks about the importance of strategy and focus on planning and always believing in your approach. If you have the data to support it, that's always important, right? Having an informed opinion, not just an opinion. And also talking about pushing hard when you want to get your point across. If you want to get your plan to work out and blossom, you have to push hard and you have to convince others of supporting you, right? He says you try to win sponsors, right? People who talk well about you, talk good about you. Even when you're not in the room, that's important to him, right? You want friends, supporters, and how he calls them sponsors who sponsor your idea and message to other people, even when you're not around. There's a lot about the story, like how he got into gaming, because everyone knows him from Nintendo. He talks about his first contact with it with Atari, ColecoVision, and then his stories with the Super Nintendo, and so on. But that's not even that interesting. And even like the last third of the book is all about Nintendo. I didn't even think that was too interesting. Yes, it was cool to see the other side of the coin, because I lived through a huge part of the time that he was in power. Like I started my Nintendo journey with the GameCube, like him. Like he joined the company, I think 2003 or 2002, when the GameCube was the big console for Nintendo, trying to turn that ship around, because it did not look good at that moment with the PS2 and the Xbox coming out. And he tried to push Nintendo into a different direction, marketing-wise, the message they wanted to convey. And he always tells about these stories of, pushing against the ideas and opinions of people like Satoru Iwata and Shigeru Miyamoto, who, are the big guys, the people with power at Nintendo. But he always pushed, he challenged those ideas, brought data to convince them otherwise. I'm sure he doesn't talk about all the approaches that didn't work, or the conversations that didn't work out in his favors. He has a few of them in there. But I'm sure we're not getting the full story on all of this. And I'm sure he tries to present himself as a doer, as someone who can convince people. And I do believe that is true. If you have seen interviews with him, you do not want to argue with this guy without bringing solid data, because you will probably lose in that debate. He talks about dealing with failure as well. One of my favorite parts in the book is his story at Procter & Gamble, his first job out of college. And he was very successful there. And at one point he talks about having this marketing campaign. And he thought, we have to start this sooner. So without his boss's approval, he started the marketing campaign sooner than it was planned to be. Basically, risking forward spending a huge part of the budget. And if it didn't work out and didn't bring in money, they would have no money to advertise further at the end. Now, it did work out, but he overstepped his own authority, and he wasn't kicked out, but he felt like his career at Procter & Gamble was killed off by that. And he thought, he has this line of saying, I was a dead man walking at the company. And he knew he had to get out. One of my favorite stories in the book. When it comes to failure, he talks about the Wii U, the 3DS. I would have loved more about that. When you see interviews from him from around that time, or from the last few years, he talks about, I realized very early on that the Wii U was doomed after a few weeks or months, because they didn't have a lot of high quality games in the pipeline. They didn't have enough content to keep the console alive. He realized that. And what he always says is, I learned a lot of lessons from that, or we learned a lot of lessons from that we would implement into the Switch launch. I would have loved more stories about how he weathered that storm, how to make the best out of a bad decision. He kind of glanced over that. He has a few stories, for example, producing a limited edition Zelda version of the company. I'm sure you know the one with the golden leaves around it on the black controller. Killing off the white model because it created confusion in the marketplace. He talks a little bit about that, but I would have loved more stories of how he weathered that storm. It was glanced over a little bit and came too short. In my opinion, I would have loved more information on that era of Nintendo. He talks about not getting comfortable, how to keep your people motivated, a lot of leadership advice in here. So if you're into that, you get a lot of stories on that too. He talks about, mentoring a person that he wasn't happy with the performance with, and in the end, realizing we have to let this guy go. We have to either give him a different position, but he cannot lead people, and we have to, fire him. basically. And he had a big round of layoffs at Nintendo because he wanted to make the whole company more efficient once he became president. Now, who is this book for? Because I'm sure like business memoirs, business book, like a lot of people don't want to run a business. They don't want to lead people and so on. This is very motivating just as a, to get the stone rolling on putting a plan into place, on not just living in the moment, on not just dealing with the situation, but grabbing it, planning, and having a clear vision of your future, the future of the company, the future for the product, and so on. And he also talks about a few situations where he said no to very good offers and very good things in his life that would have worked out, made him a lot of money. But for example, he talked about his time at Panda Express and how the company decided against going public. And the business owners told him, you can run the company, basically. And he made a decision against that because he didn't want to work for a small scale company. He wanted a big company, a big public company as well. That was his thing. So even though he had this chance of running private company, he said no to that because that was not where he saw himself at that moment. And it really got me motivated. Let me get the camera out here. Let me show my face again. Because I have an online business. I've had it for years, which has been pretty stagnant and pretty busy on hold for a couple of years. Mainly due to a very clear lack of vision and lack of planning, lack of strategy that I had put into place. I tried many things, a lot of things failed, and I didn't have the motivation, the drive to sit down and put a plan into motion and really think about each step and why I should do it, and putting together a long-term roadmap for it. And this book really motivated me to finally do this. So I told you I read this over the course of a week. I couldn't put it down. It was fantastic. If you need a little kick in the butt to get up and finally get your project, not even business, just project that you wanted to work on for ages running, the whole emphasis on strategy that this book provides really gets you going. So I'm now again planning my business, what I need to do, what I should do, and I plan on getting that rolling in the future as well over the course of the year. So if this book can get me motivated and me into the working mood, I'm sure it can do the same for you. Also, it smells very good. Thank you for watching. See you next time.